3 of The Lovely Bones starts with her talking about when you look down on Earth, and besides the initial view you might suspect the odd ants from skyscrapers phenomenon, there were souls leaving bodies all over the world. Holly and I could be scanning Earth, alighting on one scene or another for a second or two, looking for an unexpected and the most mundane moment. And she talks about she brushed by a girl named Ruth Connors as she was leaving Earth going to heaven. And Ruth's mother told her, like, your mind's just going crazy, this didn't really happen, it was just a dream. And she didn't tell her mother anymore. She did not mention the dream ever again, even 10 days later, when the story of my death began to travel through the halls of the school, receiving add-on nonsense as all good horror stories do. And she said that Ruth and her went to the same school, but they were never really that close of friends. And try as I might, I could not point Ruth strongly enough to what no one had found, my silver charm bracelet. I thought it might help her. It lay exposed, waiting for my hand to reach out, a hand that would recognize it and think, clue, but it was no longer in the cornfield. Ruth started writing poetry as a way to get out her feelings because she didn't want to talk to her mother anymore. And she said there were no approachable teachers, so she started writing her poetry. I wished Ruth could have gone to my family and talked to them. In all likelihood, no one but my sister would have even known her name. Ruth was a girl who had chosen next to last in gym. She was the girl who, when the volleyball sailed in her direction, she cowered and let the ball hit the gymnasium floor beside her. Her teammates and the gym teacher tried hard not to groan. Ruth started going through the old yearbook and found Susie's class photo, as well as activity photos like the chemistry club and the chess club, and cut them out with her mother's swan-shaped embroidery scissors. Even though her obsession grew, I remained wary of her until the last week before Christmas, when she saw something in the hallway of her school. It was my friend Clarissa and Brian Nelson. I dubbed Brian the Scarecrow because even though he had incredible shoulders that girls mooned over, his face reminded me of a burlap sack stuffed with straw. He wore floppy leathered hippie hats and smoked hand-rolled cigarettes in the student smoking lounge. There should never be a student smoking lounge at a school, especially if it's a junior high school. Clarice and Brian are kind of like kissing and stuff, and he says, let's go to the cornfield, and she just says no. She said for now she will deny him. And Ruth had been watching this whole little scene. And Ruth decided to take her mom's cigarettes, take out the tobacco from the cigarettes, and stuff them with pot. And she sat in the tool shed with a flashlight looking at photos of me, Susie, and smoking more grass than even the potheads at school could suck down. And then Susie's describing more about her in heaven. And she said, the air in my heaven often smelled like skunk, just a hint of it. It was a smell that I had always loved on Earth. When I breathed in, I could feel the scent as well as smell it. She's real big into animals. And she said Franny, who was like her advisor, Franny's heaven smelled like pure grade A tobacco, and Holly's smelled like kumquats. So, as they're in the same heaven, everyone has a different scent because it's what they want and what they wish most. She talks about looking down at her school, and the assistant football coach is leaving chocolates for the married science teacher, or the head of the cheerleading squad trying to capture the attention of the kids who had been expelled so many times from so many other schools, even he had lost count. I watched the art teacher make love to his girlfriend in the kiln room, and the principal moon over the assistant football coach, I concluded that the assistant football coach was a stud in the world of Kennett Junior High, even if his square jaw left me cold. She talks about how she's been watching Ruth a lot, and after watching Ruth one night, I met Franny in the midst of this. The square was deserted, and leaves began to swirl around in an eddy up ahead. I stood and looked at her, at the laugh lines and clusters near around her eyes. "Why are you shivering?" Franny asked. And she said that she can't help but thinking of her mother, and like she just misses her family. And then she talks about her birthday, her 11th birthday. She says, "On the morning of my 11th birthday, I had woken up very early. No one else was up, or so I thought. I crept downstairs and looked in the dining room, where I assumed my parents would be, but there was no one there. Same table as yesterday. But as I turned around, I saw it laying on my mother's desk in the living room, the fancy desk that was always clean surface. The bill-paying desk is what they called it. Swaddled in tissue paper and not yet wrapped was a camera, is what I asked for it with a whining tone, for sure I would not get it. I went over to it and stared down. It was an Instamatic, and lying there beside with 3 cartridges of film and a box of 4 square flash bulbs. It was the first machine, my starter kit, to becoming what I wanted to be, a wildlife photographer." And she also talks about her father was big on making like the ships in a bottle, and she was the only other one in the family who was also big on helping him, so she would hold the bottle while he was messing with the ship inside and like fixing it and putting up the sails and everything. And she was the only one in her family out of her siblings who was interested in helping him. And eventually he built a balsa wood stand to replace her, and then it says, "Lindsay and Buckley did not share my fascination. He always called her Susie, my baby girl, my sailor girl. You always liked these smaller ones." He talks about how one night Susie had fallen off the top of her 4-post bed onto the floor without waking up, and the thump made her dad like wonder and go into her room and check what was going on. And he saw Buckley and her were cuddled in the same blanket, so they both had fallen on the floor. And he thought no matter what happens to him or to their mom, that they always had each other. The 3 kids would always be together. Sad. And he smashed all of the ships and bottles, and through all the broken glass, Susie reflected her face, so that for a split second he saw her in all of the shards of broken glass. And the chapter ends with, "I watched my brother and my father. The truth was very different from what we learned in school. The truth was that the line between the living and the dead could be, it seemed, murky and blurred." That is the end of chapter 3.